each statement must be ended with semicolon. And if I forget to write semicolon, once again it leads to error during the execution of this code. If this code generates any error, that must be thrown and catched by the catch block. The code which is going to generate an exception, those codes are written in the try. Hello to all, a warm welcome to my new session on exception handling. I'm your Revati ma'am, Department of Computer Science, Vidhyaashram, First Grade College, Temple of Excellence, MYSURU. So dear student, before going to start my today's session, let me to revise which are the topics I have discussed in my previous session. So dear student, in my previous session, I started with multi-threading. So what is multi-threading? What is the need of multi-threading? So dear student, what is thread? Thread is nothing but the lightweight process. So what is process? Process is nothing but the program in execution. Now, dear student, if I want to run more than two process simultaneously, then I'm going to use multi-threading. Along with that, I have discussed the life cycle of a thread. In the sense, if I consider thread is going to have 5 different life cycle, that is new, runnable, running, waiting, as well as dead. Along with that, I have discussed how I can able to create thread in Java. That is in 2 ways. One is by using thread class, another one by using runnable interface. Anyway, dear student, in my today's session, I'm going to deal with what is exception handling, how to handle the exception, and the different types of exception, and which are the keywords I can able to use to handle the exception, and some simple example. Anyway, dear student, let's see what is exception. Before that, I hope all are familiar with the word error, or it's nothing but the bug. So, what is error? If error occurs, what is going to happen? So, dear student, think that, okay, you have to come to the college by 9:30. Okay, every day you're going to come to the college before 9:30. Now, if there is any traffic jam while coming to the college, then what's going to happen? You have to change the route. Okay, and you're going to reach the college by 10 o'clock. Okay, so this is nothing but the delay, or the flow is changed. So, traffic occurs and you're going to take a deviation and you're going to reach the college by 10 o'clock. So, the flow is going to change. Similarly, if I consider programming language, we are going to have the error. And if error occurs, what's going to happen? It's going to change the normal flow of the execution. Now, if I consider errors, there are 3 types of errors. Syntax, then logical error, then runtime error. Syntax error in the sense what? Think that in Java, okay, suppose if I want to write system, I want to use the letter, in the sense starting letter uppercase. Okay, instead of writing while in small letter, if I write capital letter while, what's going to happen? That is nothing but the error. Okay, syntax error. Then, if I consider logical error in the sense what? Think that I want to write 2 pi r square. Okay, instead of that, if I write 2 pi r, I'm going to get some different answer. So this is nothing but the mistake in the logic. Even if I want to write A plus B, instead of A plus B, if I write A star B, then this is also leads to error. And if I consider Java programming structure, we have to follow the rules. Okay, fine. Each statement must be ended with semicolon. And if I forget to write semicolon, once again it leads to error. And what kind of error? That's nothing but the syntax error. And dear student, whatever the thing I want to display, that should be written inside the double quote. Think that I opened double quote and I forgot to close the double quote. Then what's going to happen? Once again, it leads to error. And dear student, think that I have another example. I have 10 and I'm trying to divide this by 0. Then what kind of error? That is divided by 0 error. And when I'm going to encounter this kind of error, that is during the execution of the program, and that is known as runtime error. And to handle all kind of runtime error, Java supports exception handling. The exception handling in Java is one of the powerful mechanism to handle runtime errors so that the normal flow of the application can be maintained. In Java, exception is nothing but an event that disrupt the normal flow of the execution. So what is exception in Java? It's an event. When it is triggered, what's going to happen? It's going to disrupt the normal flow of the execution. And it is an object which is thrown at the runtime. In the sense, it is an object that is thrown and handled during the execution of the program. An exception can occur for mainly different reasons. For example, a user has entered an invalid data. In the sense, these are the certain situation we can expect the errors. Okay, an user has entered an invalid data. A file that need to be opened cannot be found. In the sense, I'm trying to open some file, but it's not found. A network connection has been lost in the middle of communication. So these are the certain kind of runtime error. So dear student, if I consider Java, the most commonly used exception keywords are try, catch, finally, throw and throws. And what is try? So dear student, I want to execute some program or some code, and what code I want to execute, I'm going to write those code inside my try block with the keyword try. So try and write the block of code. Now then, why I want catch? During the execution of this code, if this code generates any error, that must be thrown and catched by the catch block. So catch exception E. Okay, so dear student, you have to follow same scenario. In the sense, first I'm going to have the try, then I'm going to have the catch block, after that I'm going to have the finally. So then what is the need of finally? There are certain time an exception can be handled by the try and catch, even though if it is not handled by the try and catch block, then that must be handled by the finally. In the finally block, I'm going to close all the connections. I'm going to perform all cleanup procedure. I'm going to deallocate the memory as well as resources. So the finally block is used to execute the necessary code of the program. If it is executed, whether an exception is handled or not. Then throw. So what is this? This throw keyword is used to throw an exception. Then what about throws? So throws is a keyword. It is used to declare exception, and it specifies that there may be occur an exception in the method. It does not throw an exception. So dear student, these are the 5 keywords most commonly, most frequently used by Java programming language. Now try. A try statement allows you to define a block of code to be tested for errors while it is being executed. In the sense, okay, think that I'll take int a equal to 10, b equal to 20 and c equal to 0. Okay, now what I will do, I'll write a by c. What's going to happen? It's going to generate some error, and what kind of exception? That is divided by 0. And the code which is going to generate an exception, those codes are written in the try. In the sense, what code I want to execute, that should be written inside the try. So the catch statement allows you to define a block of code to be executed if an error occurs in the try block. So this is the example here. First I am going to have the try, and that must be followed by the catch block. So dear student, Java try block must be followed by the catch block or finally. So dear student, if I use try, then I can use with catch, or I can able to use try with finally. These are the 2 scenario you have to follow. So dear student, this is the simple example used to illustrate exception handling. So dear student, I have data, that is 100 divided by 10, and where I am going to write in my try block, and when I execute this program generates some error, and that is handled by the catch block. And what kind of error? That is arithmetic exception. Here E is nothing but the object. This E is used to catch the error. So I'll display system.out.println. Now dear student, common scenarios of execution. In the sense, if I consider Java program, what are the common scenarios of execution I'm having? One is arithmetic exception. In the sense, while writing program, I may make arithmetic exceptions like divide by 0. And there are certain time I'm going to reference some null pointer. Then I'm going to have null pointer exception. So here I'm going to create a string s and I'm assigning null. So now s does not have any value or any character, but it holds null value, and I'm trying to get the length of the string. When I try to get the length of the string, I am going to get null point exception. And array index out of bound. In the sense, dear student, I am going to define a array of size 5, and I am trying to access some other element. In the sense, I am trying to access the element which is not declared. For example, if I try to access 15th element, what's going to happen? I'm going to get the error. So, what is my array size? It is 5. But still, I'm trying to access 15th element. Then what's going to happen? It generates an error. And what kind of error? That is nothing but array index out of bound exception. See here. What is the size? It is 5. But in my 10th position, I am storing 50. Then it generates an error. Okay, fine. So dear student, Java multi-catch block. In the sense, for single try, I can have more than 2 catch block. So dear student, see, I have try block, and for this try, I have catch block 1 and I have catch block 2. Now dear student, this is the simple example used to illustrate multiple catch block. So dear student, see, in my try block, I am trying to create the array. Okay. And here itself, I am trying to print the 10th index. And I am going to write the catch block. In my first catch block, I'll write arithmetic exception E. And in my next block, I'll write array index out of bound. And in my next catch block, I'll write exception E. Okay, for single try, I can have more than 2 catch block. Now, the job of the compiler is to identify the type of error, and based on that, it's going to catch the error. And if I consider this example, it is array index out of bound exception. Now, the Java compiler is going to execute catch block 2. Then I'm going to have the finally block. So dear student, this is very important concept, and this is mainly used to close all the connections, and it's mainly used to perform cleanup procedure. For example, think that I have created network connection and I forgot to close the connection. In that time, I'm going to use finally. Even you can think that I have established database connection. After the execution of the program, I forgot to close the database connection. Then what I can able to do? I can able to call finally block. So finally block is a block used to execute important codes like closing the connection. Java finally block is always executed whether an exception is handled or not. In the sense, if I use finally in my program, even though the exception is not handled or handled, but still the compiler is going to execute finally block. So the finally block follows the try catch block. In the sense, suppose if I want to use finally in my program, then first I want to write try, then that must be followed by the catch, then it must be followed by the finally. Okay, this is the sequence I need to follow. Now dear student, why use Java finally block? Finally block in Java can be used to clean up. Suppose if I have any garbage values and if I want to perform cleaning, then I can able to use finally, such as closing a file, closing connection, etc. So dear student, there are certain time I'm going to open a file in my program, and if I forget to close the file pointer, then I can able to use finally. The important statement to be printed can be placed in the finally block. In the sense, what code I want to execute, that must be placed inside the finally. So dear student, when an exception occurred but not handled by the catch block. So here exception occurs but it's not handled by the catch block. So dear student, see here in my try block, I'm going to have a code. So that is 25 divided by 0. And I'm going to display the value. So what's going to happen? It's going to generate error or exception. And what kind of exception? That is divided by 0. But in my program, what I did here? Catch. And what is my exception type? That is null pointer exception E. So this exception is entirely different from the occurred exception. What is the triggered exception here? That is divide by 0. But what exception I have here? That is null pointer exception, and both are different exception. In that time, this finally block is going to execute. Okay, so this is the advantage and use of finally. So dear student, here finally block is not going to bother about the exception is handled or not. Its job is to just perform cleanup procedure. Anyway, dear student, in my today's class, I started with what is an exception in Java. Along with that, I have discussed some of the Java keywords: try, catch, finally, throw and throws. Along with that, some example programs. In my next session, I'm going to deal with collections in Java, collection framework, Java Bean property, as well as advantages and disadvantages of Java Bean. Anyway, dear students, let's meet in the next session with the new concept Java Beans. Until that, keep watching and keep learning. Thank you.